Hello, boys and girls, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer fans everywhere. Bored now, back with you. On this video, I will be talking about the 10th episode of Season 2, and it's What's My Line Part 2. So this is, of course, the second part of a two-parter, which continued before. And the first time they've had a two-parter actually on Buffy, if you don't include like the sort of two-part pilot, which I don't really, because like the end of Welcome to the Hellmouth, it sort of gets resolved very quickly in the second episode. They are sort of connected, but I don't really count that as a two-parter. I think this is the sort of first proper two-parter. And of course, the big surprise reveal at the end of part one. Full spoilers, I should say, so warning if you've never seen this episode. But the big reveal was then, of course, Kendra is another vampire slayer. She's not like the third order of Taraka demon as we were led to believe. She is in fact another vampire slayer, which is what she said to Buffy at the end, where they basically clashed. And yeah, the seeds had been planted that she was actually like a demon or something like that, but not the case. So the story of this episode is that we find out a bit of the background that Kendra was sent to Sunnydale by the Watchers Council because Buffy technically was dead for a few minutes or however long it was at the end of season 1. So that got through to them, it activated, then a new Slayer should go to Sunnydale, and that's why Kendra arrives on the scene. And what the episode shows her is that her way of doing things is very different from Buffy's. She's more schooled in the traditional ways and has had a more traditional kind of training background, and they sort of agree, like Giles agrees with like the council, then Kendra should stay in Sunnydale while the whole Spike Drusilla thing is going on. So they decide Buffy and Kendra should work together, and that leads to a very kind of odd couple type relationship. But the whole thing builds to them obviously trying to thwart Spike's plan to like restore Drew's powers, and that leads to this whole ceremony at the end of the episode where they essentially need Angel, because Angel is the one who sired Drew all those years ago. So it becomes this whole religious ceremony where they basically kidnap Angel, and they use the character of Willie to kind of sucker him in, because it was in the back of Willie's place where Angel was like captured, and so Willie basically knew Angel was there, and Spike obviously paid him off to keep Angel so that they could nab him, and that becomes a whole thing that sets up. The stakes are raised because of obviously Buffy's connection to Angel, but it's also really good like mythology building, because it again builds on the past of Angel and his connection to his darker past and the history with Spike and with Drusilla. So really good stuff in building up things and just making the world of the show and the stakes just counts a whole lot. So it's a really strong episode. I think it really pays off what was set up in the first half. And it's sort of a good Scoobies episode, really, because I think this is one of those classic episodes that sort of shows why Buffy's group and her sort of foundations and relationship with the Scoobies is so important to her success as a Slayer. And it kind of sells you on one of the main themes of the show, which is like friendship and working as a team, and the fact that Buffy is a very different sort of Slayer, a more advanced modern Slayer. And so we see that with her and Kendra, and there's sort of a lot of fun. There's a lot of comedy, which comes again from Tara's kind of, not Tara, I keep saying Tara, sorry. That's a character later in the show. Kendra's kind of, goofy sort of cheesy accent, but but whatever, I'm over that. And there's even a bit where Buffy herself makes fun of it, where she like uses like the sort of term, because when Kendra keeps saying I think after, so Buffy, when they decide to go and get information out Willie, she's like, I think we might make it, which is just great. But the actual character of Kendra, she's obviously not in the show very much, and they do tie the stuff up at the end of this episode where her purpose has been served, and obviously she's not going to stay long term because Buffy's still around and she is the Slayer for Sunnydale. But there's some nice story beats with Kendra and Buffy in this episode, because Kendra is basically just like sort of confused that Buffy leads like the lifestyle she does, the fact that she's even in school, the fact that she has friends, Willow and Xander, for example, who know about her slaying powers. There's some quite fun with when Xander comes in and sees Kendra there, and he's kind of being a teenage boy and flirting, but there's some fun with that. The fact then she's been taught not to associate with boys, not to have a date in life, even more so than with Buffy, because with Buffy, I think it's sort of frowned upon, and quite early on I think Giles was in the mindset of, you know, this is your calling, and sorry, the dating stuff has to come second. And again, it's what I love about the show, the fact that Buffy as a character doesn't just accept that. She's thinking more like, well, no, I can have both. I can work this stuff around my slaying duties, which makes it a more interesting show as a result. But this is all alien to Kendra. That there's some great stuff in there. There's like the funny little reveal then Giles has like a Slayer handbook, which he's had all this time, and Buffy's never learned about it. And it comes out in this conversation, and Buffy actually gets quite defensive because she's like, because he almost suggests, well, no, it wouldn't really interest you. And it goes back to sort of the gags from season 1 where Buffy isn't really into like studying or reading, that kind of thing. And she obviously gets quite defensive. Well, why wouldn't? And it's actually quite sweet, because essentially we're seeing Buffy just get a little bit jealous because Kendra and Giles are actually bonding, and there's this whole thing about the footnotes in the book, and they're sort of being quite playful and laughing, and it's actually really cool seeing sarcastic Buffy because she is getting jealous, and she's kind of like mocking, you know. It's not really a flirtation, but kind of how much Kendra and Giles are sort of bonding. And there's this whole fish out of water thing with Kendra, which I really enjoy, which is then, for example, when they first see Willie, like when he comes into the scene, Kendra immediately, she's like full steam ahead. She grabs him, she like threatens him, and Buffy's like, don't they just say hello when you're from? And it's stuff like that where Buffy teaches Kendra over the course of the episode then there are other ways to do things, more effective ways. The fact that you do need to communicate, or in certain circumstances, sure, you can use your powers, you can use your strength, but you also need to use it in a way where you're going to get answers. Obviously, if you just rush in all gung-ho and you just beat someone to like death or so, you're not going to get information out of them. So she actually teaches her certain little tricks about society and just an open-minded approach to slaying, where I think it's definitely selling you on the idea that Kendra's upbringing and just how strict they were in her training isn't necessarily the most effective way. I think it definitely sells you on this idea that Buffy having this close group, this tight-knit group of friends, and they all sort of had something a little bit different. Obviously, Willow and her sort of like science or her interest in computer is a definite asset to Buffy. Xander adds something a little different. So throughout the episode, I think slowly Kendra does come around, and she actually sees, that there is something to be said for this sort of lifestyle. And they kind of teach each other something. At one point they're talking about weapons and just about the slaying in general. And Buffy's kind of saying, "You're a good slayer and all. You've got good skills, but you don't think outside the box. It's all very much how you've been trained. It's not. You never mix things up. You never experiment. So that's actually quite a good little character beat of Buffy. Then she actually does think outside the box and is a more progressive slayer. And I think it's something which maybe gets brought up again in a later season, where Buffy wants to know more about her slayer roots and what have you. But by the end of the episode, they obviously work together very nicely. I loved the whole, bad news Spike, two slayers, no waiting. They sort of finish like the sentence, and Kendra comes in, and the end scene at the church and the whole fight is really awesome. There's some great fight scenes, some funny lines from Kendra, like when someone rips a shirt and she's like, "That's my favourite shirt. That's my only shirt," which I absolutely love. But there's some great fighting, and the Scoobies really come together and work together, because you have the Xander and Cordelia stuff with the Bugman. They obviously went over to Buffy's house in the last episode, and you've got like this classic sort of this demon acting as like a cosmetics salesman, sort of suckers the sort of women in because they think, oh, free samples, which of course Cordy's a sucker for that sort of thing. So they work together at the end to basically deal with him, because they basically figure, well, if you get all the bugs together and attack them, then it's gonna kill him basically. So they kind of lure him out of like the room, and then they attack with some sort of liquid or something to kill the bugs, which then kills him. And we get the really funny screwball stuff with Cordelia and Xander in this episode, where they are trapped in like Buffy's basement, because obviously this bug guy's in the house. And there's some great stuff in this episode with them, because Xander's like mocking her for just letting him in. Free samples, turned your head. And when Cordy like gets defensive, Xander's kind of like, it's not like you expect him to have a sign over his head, Demon Hunter. So it's this whole screwball type relationship, and this is of course the episode when they first kiss, and you get like the Hollywood ironic music, which is just so hilarious, because they're arguing one moment and they're all over each other the next. And it's this classic thing which almost goes back to like old movies, where you have these characters that are kind of opposed to one another. They are the complete opposite. They repulse each other. And of course, sometimes that level of energy, that level of hatred leads to them actually being attracted to each other. It's that classic story trope. We're so repulsed by each other, we just can't take our hands off each other. And it's very entertaining, because then at the end of the episode, Xander decides to have a little talk, and Cordelia is convinced that it was him who jumped her, not the other way around, which is consistent with Cordy's character. And they're both in denial about their feelings for each other, the fact that, hey, they actually do quite like each other. And it's this whole thing where they actually do it again, that they end up kissing. But for a while it plays out as they're not officially together, that they're just attracted to each other, and every now and again they go to the cupboard and they make out, but it's not actually a thing until later on. But It's really good. I think it works really well, that they have really good chemistry. And this is sort of a good example of why this show is different from many other shows with its characters, because in other shows the Xander Cordelia relationship would just be played for laughs, and you wouldn't do that much interesting with it, and it would sort of just end after a few episodes. But in this show you do actually get a relationship with them. They do actually build on that. I don't want to give too much away in case you haven't seen the show before, but they do some interesting stuff with that. So yeah, I enjoy the whole Xander Cordelia stuff in this episode. You also have Willow getting closer to Oz in this episode, because he gets in the crosshairs where the third demon attacks. There's a violent incident in the school where she's dressed as a police officer, and it's to do with the whole career week. And if you remember from the last episode, Buffy is like, her sort of results sort of like dictated then one day she might go into law enforcement. So that's why she's at like this little get together in the school. But that's one of the weaker moments of the episode, because it's just this random type action scene where the police officer, as I said, she's like the third demon, so she's like posing as a police. So she just like starts firing at people. At one point, she grabs like poor Jonathan and tries to use him as like a captive. But Oz gets shot in the arm, which kind of moves him closer to the inner circle, if you like. It moves him closer to Willow because she's obviously concerned. And I think they sell it quite well in the moment. I think you think, well, yeah, they are concerned about this. This is sort of, it is a moment. It is a tense moment. It's just then they don't really follow up from it, apart from the fact that Oz was shot in the arm and his kind of injury, but he's going to be okay. But yeah, it's something where later on in the show they would probably make a bigger deal of this. So it feels a bit of a random scene just so they can have this demon-like attack. So that's definitely a weaker scene in the episode. And I think her character, that demon, feels a bit sort of like gimmicky and not very convincing. But then you also have the stuff with Spike and Drusilla, and when they capture Angel. And if you're a fan of Drusilla, you're going to love this episode, because it's just more of her really trippy, psychotic sort of sexual sort of actions towards Angel, and the whole perverse sort of flirtation. But yeah, it's kind of brilliant, because we get more into this stuff where Angel at one point, because they're basically torturing him and getting ready for the ceremony. So Angel at one point starts sort of flirting a bit with Drew, and kind of uses it to wind Spike up. And Spike calls him out on it. He actually like cottons on to the fact, oh, I see what you're doing here. You're trying to like wind me up so that I'll end it for you, and that means we can't do the ceremony. So it's kind of a character beat for Angel as well, because it shows he's willing to sacrifice himself for the overall mission. So, but I do like the end scene in the church, and eventually Drew and Spike kind of get out and escape, but they do foil the ceremony. So you get this whole Scooby game working together vibe. And at the end, Buffy and Kendra, they come together, and there's a nice moment where it's kind of like she says to Kendra, I'm a freak after all. And Kendra says, well, not the only freak. And Buffy says, not anymore. And they sort of, they don't hug because that's frowned upon, but it's a great little moment. And the sort of, the cliffhanger is that at the end, Spike has been injured, and Drusilla is sort of back to full strength, but Spike is now vulnerable, and she lifts him up and is kind of like don't worry, love, I'll get you back to full strength soon. And that's the end of the episode. So pretty solid all round, good episode, some good character building, some good world building. And I sort of do like what they do with Kendra, even though it's only really for one episode, having her and Buffy. So I'll give it 7.5 out of 10, which is the same as the part one, but I do think this is the stronger episode because it really pays off what it set up in the first one nicely. So it's going to be quite high. I'll update the rankings when I put the video up, but it's going to be quite high, I think. Still not top drawer, but pretty high. So there you have it. That's What's My Line Part 2. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe. And next time on Buffy, I will be doing the episode Ted. So that's the 11th episode of Season 2. And that's quite an interesting episode as well, for a number of reasons. So if you want to watch Ted and be ready for the next review, then that's going to be the next one. And coming up soon on the channel, I will be starting my look at the X-Files. So over the next week, you can expect I'm planning to do a live stream of the pilot of episode 1 of the X-Files. So that's coming up soon on the channel. So look out for that. But thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys soon. Goodbye.